All right.
Welcome to the Top 200 podcast with your host, Richard Ford.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Monday morning meeting. We're getting a bit low in the season right now, so these are kind of coming to an end as I shuffle around with my papers or my notes. But we're getting down to the last bit of the season. Like CNI is now into a final, so it's a Super 8. We're going to get into like the Chiefs, the Hurricanes, and that. So like even in terms of rankings are going to stop soon. We only got a few weeks of that left for players and also teams. But yeah, it's going to be pretty cool to see how everything is panning out and to see everyone that makes the finals. Obviously, there have been some pretty big upsets, and just over this past weekend, it's been pretty. I mean, it's exciting and sad at the same time, I guess, because I'm just one of those guys that like the teams that are supposed to win. I understand that the interesting side of it, of underdogs and all that kind of stuff, but I'm into the teams that have built and have worked hard and that have, I guess, recruited properly or brought through talent properly or set a guideline for their teams to play at a certain level or play at a, just that kind of stuff. I believe in those guys, those teams being the ones that win and those teams being the ones that come out at the end where they're supposed to be, I guess. And that's kind of how I am with pretty much everything as well. Like, I mean, even in the NFL and the NBA, like I have my teams like the Chargers and also the Jazz and that, but and those things are separate from what I think it should be. But I mean, as much as a Jazz fan that I am, right now it looks like the Lakers and Nets are gonna pretty much again make the finals. I guess if the Clippers have something to say about it, I guess the Hornets are going to look okay, as well as the Heat. You can't count out Luka and you can't count out Giannis. The Knicks got a little bit better, even though they're the Knicks. But and my Jazz are still going to be up there, and that's probably like one of the only ones that I feel like that would have a big shot. My Chargers is kind of the same thing, where I feel like we're maybe second within our division, because obviously the Chiefs are going to be really good. San Francisco look like they got a bit better. The Seahawks look like they're going to be the Seahawks again. Can't count out the Bills. Obviously Tom Brady's still Tom Brady. Things like that. And so I know where my teams are supposed to sit. And then apart from that, I just like that the teams that have prepared well and that are seen as the leaders are going to be the leaders. And so that's kind of how I look at things all the time. I don't pick to see who's going to be this outbreak team or whatever. It's a great storyline, I guess, but I'm just not that kind of person. Yeah, I'm not really into that kind of stuff. I think where we should start off at is probably the 1A. I mean, because how about this? How about we start off at I want to start off with the Harbour comp, right? Westlake, who's just had like this really hard run of games from New Plymouth, which they won against Massey, then they had Whangarei, and then they had Whangarei, and then they had Rewa again. And I just put them in the top 25 just this past weekend, and then they lose again to Manurewa. And I think because Westlake's always been a strong team over that side, and so I kind of understand it. And so like the one of the teams to always be really, really strong, and even when they have sort of a rebuilding year, like this year is kind of a rebuilding year for them. Have a bunch of young players, and so they're going to be really good next year, really experienced team. But at the same time, losing to Manurewa again, obviously this is their second time they've lost to them, really kind of puts like a bit of a dampen on who they actually are as a team. And like I've just mentioned, that they are young. They are young. And they do have a lot of injuries. But if that's the case, in terms of rankings, right? I have Manurewa all the way down. They've beaten Westlake twice, knowing that they can beat Westlake twice. The Westlake's also lost to Rosmini. Westlake have also beaten 2 Super 8 teams, New Plymouth and Tauranga Boys. And Tauranga Boys have beaten Hamilton Boys. And not only that, if Westlake Boys are truly not stronger than Manurewa, and Pukekohe High School have beaten Manurewa, and quite convincingly, to be honest, does that mean that this whole competition as a whole drops down? And when it comes to rankings, is that you don't really value that competition in terms of rankings? Does that also pull down the Super 8? For Westlake can beat 2 Super 8 teams. And one of those Super 8 teams has beaten a finals team in the Super 8 as well. And Hamilton Boys. And does Pukekohe belong in a top 30 to 25 ranking then? Because if all those teams come into it, and like think about it this way too, right? If Westlake Boys beat Tauranga Boys, Tauranga Boys beat Hamilton Boys, almost beat Kelston Boys, and almost beat Hastings Boys, does Pukekohe deserve to be up there? Now Pukekohe's going to get their shot too, because Pukekohe's going to be playing in the Coed Cup for the Chiefs region, hoping to go there, and they're going to end up coming up against I guess St. Peter's School in the CNI. Now if they're able to beat someone like them too, and add sort of that dynamic to it as well, then maybe Pukekohe should have been in the top 25 this whole year, or at least gradually made it to the end, because then that would put them in a different scenario in terms of how good this team actually is. If they can beat Manurewa, Manurewa can beat Westlake twice, and Westlake was able to take out New Plymouth Boys pretty easily, and also beat Tauranga Boys. Now if that's the case, then that changed the whole dynamic of how these rankings will actually fit together, and where everybody's wins and losses actually mean something, and what that actually says on a national scale of it. Because if anything, that brings a bunch of teams even closer together. Because Tauranga, if you watch a Tauranga and Kelston Boys game, Tauranga had Kelston Boys for a good 17 minutes of controlling the ball. And this is something good that Tauranga does really good, is that they control the ball, they really control their mistakes, and they control the ruck really well, and they run a lot of good players with a lot of good support around them. And so they don't actually give a lot of a ball away. And they kind of go through a real suffocating kind of situation with whoever they're up against. They just suffocate on the defense, and then they just keep branding runners and safe runners that have really good ball control. And so they had Kelston boys for a while in that game where Kelston was really just tackling the whole time. And then even when Kelston scored their points, they went scoring points and then went back to Tauranga controlling the game again, and Tauranga was just not finishing off those tries. And to me, obviously, it comes to their youth, where they're just playing an older team in Kelston boys, and a lot of these boys from Tauranga boys, especially in that back line and pretty much in that loose trio from some of the starters and the guys coming off the bench, is that it was just a lot of lack of experience in a way. And Tauranga actually brought them pretty close to upsetting Kelston, and Kelston only got it right in the end, and I mean right in the end, where they actually separated themselves away from Tauranga boys. And so that really does spin a different kind of story in terms of ranking, with the fact that Westlake being put in the top 25 finally, losing again to Manurewa twice this year, once to Rosmini, and with Manurewa losing to Pukekohe, to me shrinks down a lot of these competitions and then how they actually turned out. And it would be something that I'm thinking about even now in terms of how these come out tonight, and depending on when I put out these rankings as well, is that maybe Pukekohe do end up being a top 30 team and closer to the top 25. And what happens when it comes to the Coed Chiefs Cup? Because if they end up beating St. Peter's and going through as a representative, that's quite big for a team like Pukekohe this year. And they do, I guess, need to get their credit given too, because that's important as well, especially with how they've been playing all year. Now, one of those things, I guess, well, that kind of just brings me to just talking about Kelston, as Kelston also had a run-in with Kings College just on Saturday, and Chicago Doyle was the one that saved Kings from actually getting annihilated, I think, because Kelston boys was actually on a run. Every time that they scored their points, their tries, they were off really good really good run plays, really good physical rucks, and they were just getting the ball out and just driving them back. Then Kings would go down, get a penalty, and then Chicago would just kick them over, and then he kept that score close. I mean, I think Chicago scored 12 points on his own. And when it was 17-17, he could have won that game. And then they missed the kick. And this was like sort of time over. Missed the kick. Then Kelston at 17-17 in the last, overtime I guess it was, ran it all the way back for a try. And like this try was so good that it was just went hands, ruck, hands, ruck, hands, ruck. And then they just went all the way down the field. And then Jacob Laban scored the try right at the end. Pretty much under the post, and then they didn't really need to kick it over, but they did. And so like it was just like that situation where Kings really had Kelston boys there. They really had Kelston sort of had them on the ropes, had them, I guess, thinking more about how they were going to distance themselves. Now, they were missing some kicks. They missed some kicks, and it was so bad. It was bad that they missed their kicks, but they missed their kicks. They were scoring tries, but Kings weren't a threat of going away, which was so good. Which was good to see that, Chicago pretty much kicked them to stay within touch and then really put that pressure on them. Now, I didn't think that Kings were going to win this game anyway, but I didn't think it was going to be that stressful. I thought the game would be close, and then in the last 15 minutes, I thought Kelston was going to pull away. And I still kind of thought that even when I was watching the game, but then Kings just kept coming back, and I think that this is actually a really big wake-up call for Kelston boys to maybe make some adjustments. And maybe it's more about a few players being adjusted around, being moved around. Also, the discipline side of it, giving away penalties within that range, especially when they know that when they have kickers. And I didn't even know Chicago could kick that good. But he was just hitting them over. And I'm sure it was Chicago. It wasn't Francis. I don't remember him kicking them. But it was just so good. And there was like parts where Zion was just Maul was just running through us, and he was just so effective in the way that he played. And even Essendon Tuitupou was playing really good out at centre, and then what's his name from fullback was also coming through, and obviously Centre Lawaki was back at number 8, and he just played this big role of, and I like the way that he plays, and I like the way that he's captaining his side, and then him sharing those responsibilities with him and Sam Howling and sort of the way that they run their game. And even Shay Clark for Kings in a way wasn't able to do what he usually does. This is actually the first game that I didn't see Shay actually make an impact on the game. Every other game I've seen, and I've pretty much seen all their games this year, is that this is the first time I've never really seen him make an impact at all. Even in the games that they lost, he was still always real effective, but this is the first time I didn't think that he did have that same effect. And if they get to play again, Shay's probably going to have a different attitude against us, and really go out there and just force dominance. And I also understand that, like, sometimes Shay's responsibility on the field is always out wide, and like however you want to like look at it, and however you want to see him as a player, as like. I mean, I've had guys complain to me about it, just like, oh, well, he just hangs out on the wing. I was like, well, he doesn't hang out there because he wants to. That's kind of his role. His role is that he's been told to stand out there. If he wanted to come in, like, if you saw him at year 10 and year 11, and the way that he played tight in the forwards, he was a monster, and he just monsters guys off the ball. Now, they have this situation where they actually want to get the ball free, and then want to have that mismatch outside, and then because of his speed and power and length of his arm and the way that he can separate himself from tacklers, is like, that's why they have him out there. So you can't really criticize him for not coming and do the work, because like that's his role, is to be out there. I am like most other people, where I want to see him, destroy guys within the rucks and just really get down and make hit tackles and stuff like that. But I mean, if that's his role, that's his role. But this Kelston game to me was a bigger wake up call for Kelston than was for Kings, and I think that Kelston needed it. It's not easy to go unbeaten in the 1A. It's not an easy thing to go in and out of every single game, every single week, take that physical punishment, and then be able to back it up every single time with a win. But in this case and in this scenario, is that like there's only 2 unbeaten teams this year right now in terms of my rankings, is that, and that's Kelston Boys High School and Hastings Boys High School are the only 2 unbeaten teams this whole year. And I started my rankings on May the 2nd, I think it was, when I think that was the year, the date that the Miles Toyota Championship started up, because Christchurch is the first competition to start up. So I started on their week that they start their competition, so that it flows with everybody else. And since then, Kelston hasn't lost a game, and Hastings hasn't lost a game, and so it's I don't know if you want to say that it's going to be that's going to be a national championship game. It would be pretty cool if it does, but that's the way it's kind of looking right now. And even the way in which going to the game yesterday with when I went and saw Hastings and Hamilton. Hastings pretty much controlled every part of the game in that forward pack, other than the scrums. Scrums went to Hamilton boys pretty easily. Other than that, it was all about Hastings boys for everything else. Even the run game and even on defense, like, they scrambled so good on defense, Hastings boys, and just the way that they went out there and tackled in twos and threes, spread really quickly after the tackle, didn't really get penalised too much with hands in the ruck, things like that. They weren't playing under pressure. They weren't playing like they weren't even playing like they were the underdogs or anything like that as well. And Hamilton boys always have that kind of effect on teams, where they make teams to look like they're coming into a losing battle kind of thing. And Hastings didn't look like that at all. Didn't even play like that at all. They played like they were the winners, and that's exactly what they did. Now, Cooper Flanders, the way that he played, him and Kako were like both of those two, I think, were the two guys that I think changed it for Hastings boys, I think because those two really did control the run game. They really controlled like the physicalness of the game, and they really controlled how I guess the run game was going to go. I mean, Kaiho like really played such a physical game at 6. It was he pretty much dominated a lot of what they did in that breakdown. It was Kaiho, Cooper Flanders most of the time. A1 had a really good game. AV was another one that had a really good game, and then if it wasn't for Hoyder Stevenson, they wouldn't have had the successful game that they played on Saturday. And it really was It really was like a point where they did prove how good they actually were, and how good they had actually gotten since the preseason. And it was cool seeing them in the preseason play against Kelston boys. Really did hold off Kelston boys a lot until the end of the game, where Kelston kind of ran away with it and scored, I think it was 2 tries right towards the end, and Hastings just fell apart. But to see them how they are now, and what they're doing now, if these two teams, Hastings and Kelston boys, end up in the finals for the national championship, it's going to be a pretty mean game, and it's not going to be all one-sided like I think most of us are thinking, with Kelston boys being the one-sided winners. And I think it's going to be, and I don't know. In some cases, I kind of wish that it becomes that way, and that we get to see 2 top teams. But I mean, you never kind of know, because St. Peter's playing really good right now in Auckland. They could easily top Kelston as well, and they've shown that within the 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 rounds. I think they were in second round or first round up, and they played them, and Kelston just won just in the end. Hamilton's still on there. Rotorua boys are still there, and even within the Super 8, Hastings boys, Rotorua boys, and Hamilton boys are all kind of like in that same. They're in that same circle together. I kind of think like even though Rotorua boys has lost to Hastings and Hamilton, there's just not that much separating them. So even on the day, if all three teams were supposed to play, like I really wouldn't know who's going to win. Like I would just be taking a pretty wild guess at which one. I mean, I would have to take it like who's being injured or who's changed position or, you know, who's actually turned up or who was mucking around at school that they didn't get to play on the Saturday. Things like that, because like that's kind of the things that happens just, you know, in a daily week where, you know, kids don't play because they've been playing up at school or they don't even go to school or they're not getting their assignments done, things like that. And so, you know, it's going to be really interesting, even within the Hurricanes region. Scots is still a threat. Like Scots is still a threat to Hastings boys. Scots is, and even in saying that, Wellington is also still a threat, and Silverstream is still a threat to Scots as well. You know, within that place too. And then, I mean, you still got Palmy boys there. You know, you still got those kind of things going on there. So, you know, that's not always going to be the same down there either. You know, that's not always going to be a given that Hastings is going to make it. There's still a lot of teams, and even down south, like St. Thomas could come out as a top 4 finishers. You know, they could end up playing Otago boys or something like that. Otago boys could come out. So even in terms of talking like top 4, it's just like I don't think it's really that. I don't think there's a really clear team coming out of any region right now, and that's kind of never really happened since I've been sort of covering First 15 rugby, like where I haven't been sure. I'll be like, that team's alright, they'll be 3, or that team will be 3, or even like 2 teams, put it down to 2 teams, they could be. I mean, like think about Mags, someone like Mags who's such a young team right now. Mags can also topple Kings and St. Peter's if they, you know, on the day. You know, they kept it close with Kelston boys, but I mean, Mags is not really one to sell out either. Kings still have to watch out for them, and St. Peter's still have to watch out for them too. And remember, Mags has got a young team coming back. You know, there's a bunch of those boys that are still coming back, so they're also a threat too. And so, you know, looking at it that way, I guess top 4 is not far away, but teams can't look towards the top 4 yet. I guess the CNI was, you know, looking at these competition games and saying, like, CNI, I knew St. Paul's was going to win. It was a bit back and forth of how they were going to win or what they were going to do, but St. John's just had too many injuries, and all they had were young guys backing up, and that's hard. That's not an easy thing to do. And a lot of these boys for St. John's are going to be back next year, so that's going to be pretty uplifting that we'll be able to see them too. But St. Paul's were just too good. Another hard game 2 weeks in a row, and St. John's just couldn't pull it off. But the St. Peter's one and the Whanganui one was really surprising. And I don't really want to put it on Cody Vite because, you know, there were a few more opportunities than just Cody getting that runaway. And Cody played so well in that game too. And, like, you know, not just scoring his own try before, you know, not just scoring a try, but even on defense, there was a lot of stuff on defense that he did well too. And I think Whanganui just scrapped them out of it. Even that charge down to win the game, you know, like that one was really, I guess, one of those kind of situations where it just doesn't happen like that, you know, like you just don't expect it to be like that. But you do have to just play on. You do have to kind of just take what comes in, and that was really a big upset. That was an upset, actually. St. Peter shouldn't have lost that game, but that's just the way it goes, like as many opinions and predictions as I want, is it's like they still have to go out on the field and play the game. That's that's just what it is, There's no use having stuff like this to report on if I make the decisions on who wins and loses. I just put my opinion out there based on a lot of facts and homework, and then being like, well, that's who should win, kind of thing. But it's good for Whanganui to have another go, and I guess we were all kind of in the CNI looking at another St. Peter St. Paul's final, but it just doesn't happen like that. And it was kind of sad to see the boys like that and the way that they lost. But I like this idea. Like next week, I'll be going down to Taupo and watching all the CNI teams, and I like this. I really like this idea. I actually kind of think that the Super 8 should join them in Taupo as well, where what the CNI is doing is all the teams are going to Taupo into Delaney Park, or Owen Delaney Park, and then they all play there at 12 o'clock. I wish the games were different, actually, because I want to watch all those games, I don't want to turn around and then turn around to the other field, and halftime I walk up to the other field and watch the other two games, and because I'll just be watching half games of sort of everybody. I really don't want to do that, but I mean that's just the way it is. But having all the teams there at the end of the season after the finals and all have a feed together or whatever, I think Super 8 should probably meet up there, and if the CNIs are going to be playing at 12, I think that they should play at 2 o'clock or 2:30 or something like that, and just have two big competitions there, have all the boys mix and mingle and say what's up to each other, because if you think about it, right, all these boys are all going to know each other when they leave school. Everyone's going to be moving to other people's regions. Everyone's going to be in the next club teams together. Everyone's going to be talking about where they're going to school next year, what universities they're going to, or what teams, actually what provinces they've signed to and what unions they've signed to, because one's going to talk to the other and go, I'm going to Otago, and everyone's going to, yeah, I'm going to Otago too, and I've already signed. Things like that, and all of that to sort of start off from there. At the end of a big season, all those teams get together. That's pretty cool, and I think Super 8 should probably do that. Look at that next year, maybe coordinate something with the CNI that everyone meets up there. Everyone meets up in Taupo. Have a big finish, have a big photo. It would be cool to see everyone in their blazers and stuff. It would pretty much just look like a New Zealand secondary school trial with how much good players turn up just from those two competitions in itself. It looks like there's be so many New Zealand prospects just in those two competitions alone. But that's where I'm going to be next week. I'll be down in Taupo watching the CNI finals for sure, and depending on what's happening with everything else. But that's where I'll be anyway. The Wellington competition is also going to be one that's pretty interesting, and I know that I have Scots first. And I have Scots sitting at the top. They are the top right now, but they're not like a solid number one. I think that they can lose. And I think that they can lose to Wellington and Silverstream. I think St. Pat's is like a step behind. I think they're a step behind, and it's not a big step behind, but they are a step behind the three other teams. And Wellington and Silverstream is going to be a good matchup, but any of those two teams can beat Scots. And Scots is the team that has to really watch out for, they have to be the one that really watches out and what happens in those other games. I would hate to see Scots lose, in the semi-final to Town. It would be good for Town, but it would just be gutting to see them lose, going perfect throughout the year in the competition, and just trip up at the end, It just wouldn't be fun, because they haven't actually lost, I guess, since the quad tournament that they had. It was the last time I think they lost. And so they've been on a pretty good, perfect run right now. And they're playing good too. And the thing is that they're a really good team. They're a really good side, and I love watching their games. And it's not about the big scores that they're putting up. It's the way that they're actually playing is what I really like about it. It's the way that these boys have sort of gotten together as a team and really made, really made everything work for them, you know. I mean, I guess because the way that I've always seen Scots is that they're always this big running team. I mean, because you got the guys from, I guess that era of Alex Fido and the Umaga Jensen twins and TJ Vaya and Malo, you know, all of those guys all playing, and then we get to this team that's this team now, and now we've got Maya Timmer-Schmidt, who always has a good game. He's such a good player. Sione Latu, who's really young, and I will be able to see him for the next 2 years and see him develop. Aiden Christensen's playing really good, so is Tana, and Cody Lokotui, who's playing, who I think is such a really good leader on that team, and he's the one that sort of brings everybody else together. Because, like, I mean, you still, I guess because you got Valentine Parker, you got Manu Latu, you got Braden, and you still, what's that other guy, the young kid, who's the prop as well. And I mean, I haven't even mentioned, like, Yeti Campbell yet, who's obviously one of the best midfielders coming through next year. But you still got Moody Stewart as well at halfback, who also, I guess, conducts and controls that pace. But having someone like Kaya as well, and like Aiden Hammond, like all these guys, I mean, if you watch Aiden Christensen play, and he's such an agitator, but he's an agitator that you kind of want on your team. Like, he's the guy that you want on your team, and he's the guy that you want to punch in the head from the other team. He's like that kind of guy, but you'd like him if he's on your team. But he's the guy that you talk about when you're on the bus, and he's like, man, I wanted to boot that kid. That's kind of how that guy is. Like, Aiden Christensen is such a good player at his role, that because he goes 100%, it just makes things better for Tana, or makes things better for Cody, or makes things better for Maya. And then sometimes you get, you know, him being getting runs closer to, you know, the first five, and you get Kaya running through them, you know, guys like things like that. And so Scots having that control over their team and running as a team has been really cool to watch, and it's all coming together, and it's all a lot better, and it's a lot better than when I first saw them at down in Napier. They're a lot better team, and they're a lot better team than what they showed up to Quad with. And it just took these guys a while to get to this position that they're in now. And as cool as I would like to see them go through and you know, win this competition, it's not a given. Silverstream make it through, or Wellington make it through, it's just not a given that, you know, that they're going to beat one of those two teams. And so it is going to be a real push for them. And I mean, like, no one at this point in time, like, no one in the competition right now sort of has the right to say that they're the best. I mean, look at St. Bede's in that yesterday, and the way that they were playing, you know, the way that they've been playing in these last games, and then they only just beat out St. Thomas by 2 points, and they were up by, I think it was like 17 something at halftime, I think it was, or 15 something at halftime. It was like 15-3 or 15-5 or something like that, and St. Thomas just fought their way back. But even that, St. Bede's being the top in that competition, as they're not safe. Neither is Nelson, neither is Timaru. St. Thomas is the same. You know, all these. It's just hard to say. It's hard to say which team is going to be the best. St. Bede's, okay, like, so St. Bede's for me need to be a lot tougher in that forward pack. when you got bigger packs playing against St. Bede's, they can only hold up for so long, and then it falls apart. And I saw this against St. Peter's, because St. Peter's they held up against St. Peter's a lot, and then it was just too much that came through that they ended up falling apart after a while. Now, if you can take St. Bede's to that point until they fall apart, then you'll be fine, because then you can just I guess carry that energy and that determination, and make sure you get them to that point where they fall apart. Then you'll be fine. Then you can carry on through, and then I think that they're pretty much an open book, and then they kind of have to turn to their backs, where you still got Mason Allison back there, and even with Isaac Hutchinson, and then you got Shadrock back there too, where they're going to have to try and get the ball to them fast and get it out of the forwards and things like that. And that's where I think St. Bede's have to start picking themselves back up there. St. Thomas is the same in terms of that they are such a young team that their experience is something that they don't have. And a lot of the times that I've watched their games this year, a lot of it was just of pure raw talent, and there was not that much guidance in the team at all. But just through their talent, they just played things out. They just chanced a lot of stuff, and it just kind of worked out, and they're kind of getting all these wins like that. Now, if you were to disrupt them, I think that they'll fall apart just through just disrupting their offloads, disrupting at the breakdown. If you sort of suffocate the ball runners a lot, get them isolated, then they don't know how to play after that. They've only got a few boys in that forward pack that will know how to do things in that situation. The other boys, to me, don't. And so that's where you kind of get it. And then even when you get it into the back line, if you can find gaps down in that, down behind the back line and behind the line, getting wingers to drop back, getting the fullback to run side to side, and find kicks going over there and hitting the grass and sort of rolling towards the line and trapping them down there, that's another way to me that they have to figure that stuff out, because St. Thomas ain't good running that ball back they just run it back without a plan. They run it back on their own. They kind of become individuals, and then after that they get stuck. So if you can isolate straight away and trap them, I think they're going to have a problem. Nelson's kind of the same, where Nelson's midfield, to me, is the target of where you want to run. Pretty much from first five to centre, anywhere in there, if you can just keep targeting, and it won't hold up. It just won't hold up. You need one of those loose forwards, or two of those loose forwards, to go out there. Because Nelson can win the game just in the forwards alone. If you're trying to fight Nelson in the forwards just alone, you're not going to win. Not at all. They're just too strong and too big. Too tough of a team just to try and battle them in the forwards. But if you send that ball out wide and you keep having all these runners coming on angles and sort of disguising and getting guys running around the back, and just keep targeting within that first five to centre area, you're going to break through. You need to spread out that forward pack. And it's not like a challenge to take on Nelson in the forward pack, because you're not going to win. But these are just the things that I've seen. These are the things that I've seen in terms of what I've watched, is that in those targeted areas, it's like they overcommit to something instead of really reading a situation. They overcommit, and then that's where things start breaking down, or the communication breaks down too. I mean, Timaru's kind of in a similar position as well, is that the forward pack goes really well, but then if you start spreading that ball out a bit wide, you can beat them out there. You can beat them out wide. You can run a move and then find that backline standing still and a bit square, and then any guy you have running a different angle and changing angles, he's only going to meet arm tackles. There's no shoulders going to be put on him because everyone's stopped and they're just standing straight and everybody's straight. No one's really, sort of got an angle on themselves or ready to adjust or ready to, that kind of thing. And that's where kind of, even when I see Timaru, because Timaru is such a good forward pack that's just the way that they play and they just blow it up that way. But then when it comes to the back line, sometimes the back line doesn't even, they don't imitate the same way that the forwards will. They won't have that same kind of balance in their back line. It always seems to be something a bit different, and maybe they need to get some of their boys out there too, to hit out in that back line as well, where those loose forward covers and kind of in all honesty, when I talk about it, because I don't really like talking like this as well, but those loose forwards for Timaru, they do a lot of work. They do a lot of cleanup work, and that's the reason why they're such a good team. Now, if you can isolate those guys in different areas and then start sort of sending out some attack when you see 6 and 7 sitting there and 8 sort of caught out somewhere and be like, well, if we send it out there because these 3 boys are here, Timaru's going to find some empty spots out there in that back line. And I think that all those teams are all going to have these struggles when it comes into playoff time, semi-finals time. And it just depends on who's going to expose the other team's weakness, how they do it, and in what way are they going to start, pressuring that team, and even in what time of the game are they going to do it? You don't want to sometimes push these teams right at the beginning where they just look and they go, oh, what are these guys trying to do? And then they adjust. Then your game plan's out the window. Who are these teams that are going to build for something and really try and get something great out of it, and then they can turn all these sort of turnovers and stuff like that into points and really get things going. And I'm not really sold on. I mean, St. Bede's, Nelson, Timaru, and St. Thomas right now are, to me, the top 4 teams. But then you still got Christ College and also Christchurch boys in a way there too. But maybe I think that the right 4 and the right are at the top. I kind of feel like I don't know. I guess like you want the top 4 there. I guess you want the top teams there, and which is like going to be like the best. I guess competition. You want the best. I guess you want the best teams at the end of the year, that kind of stuff. And I mean, like I said before, it's like, yeah, that's kind of like what I'm into. That's kind of what I like. And I think, I guess, it's going to be interesting. Anyways, it's going to be interesting. It's going to be a good finals. It's going to be a good... it's a good time right now. That everyone's coming down to the end of the season. It looks like Otago boys. To me, Otago boys is like the most improved team probably this year, in terms of what they went through at the beginning, and even from what I heard around the school as well, from different players and different guys that sort of around the team, as they thought they was kind of rebuilding it. But I think Otago boys is a legitimate team to come up to top 4 too. They've taken care of every other team down there, and Kings, Southland, and even John McGlashan are really good teams. And I think Otago boys can step it up and maybe put a hurt on one of those teams. Whoever makes it out of that Miles Toyota Championship too. I think they're going to have a hard game against Otago boys. And when the right Otago boys comes too. And it's always going to be hard with those guys from Otago and the way that they play. And so it's going to be an interesting top 4. But all the rep teams are coming out, so congratulations to all those guys coming out of rep teams. You know, you guys have worked so hard, and you know, all this kind of stuff is your reward as well as making all these teams train hard and play hard and all that kind of stuff too. But that's me for now. I'll probably be doing a couple of write-ups. If you want me to do a write-up about your game or your team or, you know, players, just let me know. Like, and I'll just write down my thoughts and, you know, write down what I think and how I see things going. But all the rankings are going to be updated this week and next week, and then I'll let everybody know when the ranking sites stop. But this is High School Top 200. Herschel, peace.